Don had no idea that a simple repair job would change his entire life. He was a human engineer working in the outer rim of the galaxy. His job was to fix old trade ships near the alien border stations. Most of the time, he was alone. Just his tools and a warm cup of recycled coffee. Nothing exciting ever happened. Until one day he slipped. He had been working on a broken energy coil deep inside a cargo ship. The floor was wet from coolant, and as he stepped back, his boot lost grip. He fell hard and hit his head on a metal beam. Everything went dark when Dan woke up. He wasn't in the ship anymore. He was lying on a strange white bed. The air smelled clean, almost too clean. Above him were lights that blinked in slow patterns. Machines beeped softly nearby. He turned his head and saw a tall, slim alien in a white coat standing next to him. "You are awake," the alien said calmly. "Good, the procedure's complete." Dan sat up slowly, holding his head. "What procedure?" The alien smiled. "We have been accepted as the bonding parent. Congratulations." Don blinked. "What? Parent? What are you talking about?" Another alien walked in, this one shorter with 3 eyes and green skin. It held a silver tablet and showed him a screen. On it was a small glowing pod. Inside floated a tiny alien baby. "This is Roy," the 3-eyed alien said proudly. "Your genetic match. Your DNA was perfect for the growth process. The child is already adapting to your traits." Dan stared at the screen. "Wait. This has to be a mistake. I didn't sign up for anything like this. Just hit my head." The tall alien nodded. "Yes. You were unconscious when we scanned you. Our system identified you as the chosen donor. The process began immediately. Cannot be reversed." Dan stood up, dizzy. "Look, I'm not ready to be a parent. I'm a ship mechanic. I don't even know how to take care of a regular child, let alone an alien one." "You will learn," the alien said gently. "The bonding has already started. The child has linked emotionally to your presence." Don stared at the pod again. The little creature inside floated peacefully. Looked strange, but also kind of cute. Small arms, glowing eyes, tiny fingers curled in a sleeping pose. "How long until he wakes up?" Dan asked. "Approximately 6 cycles," the green alien replied. "You will remain here until then. Training and care lessons will be provided." Don sighed and sat back down. "Great. I came to fix a ship, and now I'm a dad." The next few days passed in a blur. Dan was given food, rest, and a lot of lessons. Alien parenting wasn't easy. The child needed emotional balance, light exposure, and sound melodies for brain growth. Dan had to sing certain tones before sleep time. He had to hum patterns while feeding. Everything was strange and new. On the 5th cycle, he stood in front of the pod. The lights around it turned blue. The medical staff gathered. The pod opened slowly with a soft hiss. Inside, the child floated for a moment, then opened its eyes. Bright gold, glowing, soft blue skin with little white patterns. It blinked, looked at Dan, and reached out. "Dada," the child said. Don froze. "That is a strong bond," the nurse said happily. The child stepped out and touched Dan's hand. Warmth spread through Dan's fingers. The child smiled. "His name is Roy," the nurse reminded him. "Hi, Roy," Don said slowly. "I'm your dad, I guess." Roy tilted his head, then hugged him. Dan didn't know what to say. He looked around at the aliens watching him, and then looked down at the small being clinging to his leg. Later, Dan sat on a soft couch with Roy beside him. The child looked at everything with wide eyes. Screens, lights, machines, even the sound of Dan tapping his foot made him giggle. "You're really here," Dan whispered. "I don't know what I'm doing, kid, but I'll try." Roy leaned against him and yawned. The alien nurse handed him a care guide. He is sensitive to stress and fear. Emotions affect his balance. Remain calm, even when things feel difficult. Don nodded. "Yeah, calm." "Sure." That night, Roy didn't want to sleep. He kept floating in circles. Don tried reading the guide. Nothing worked. Okay, buddy, Don said, tired. On Earth we sing lullabies, he started, humming a simple tune, slow, soft song his mom used to sing. Roy stopped spinning. He floated toward Dan, curled up in his lap, and slept. Dan looked down at him and smiled. Okay, 1 point for human parenting. Outside the room, the head doctor watched through the glass. The bond is strong, she said. Perhaps stronger than we expected. Should we report it? Another alien asked. Not yet, she said. Let us observe a little longer. Inside, Don fell asleep with Roy resting against him, both breathing slow and calm under the soft lights. Days passed, and Dan slowly got used to being called Dad by a glowing little alien who floated instead of walked. Roy had a habit of floating up to the ceiling. When he got excited, he'd spin in place, giggling in his strange musical tone. Dan had to carry around a long grab stick just to bring him down when he didn't respond. It was like parenting a balloon with a brain. The Alien Medical Center gave Dan a new living pod to raise Roy. It had soft gravity fields, calming lights, and a small learning screen. Roy could already read some alien symbols. He also loved touching buttons. Don had to disable half the systems after Roy made the room spin sideways one morning. Roy, shh. No more pressing green buttons, Don said firmly, as he floated near the ceiling again. Green button makes room funny? Roy replied, laughing. Yes, but also makes me fall on my face. Roy giggled harder. Dan couldn't help but smile. Raising a kid wasn't what he signed up for, but somehow it was becoming the best part of his day. Every morning, a nurse visited to check Roy's health. She'd scan his body, test his energy levels, and ask Dan if there were any strange changes. He hummed in his sleep last night, Dan said one morning. The nurse nodded. That means emotional comfort. Your bonding is helping his core energy stabilize. Glad to know I'm not totally messing it up. You were doing well, human father. Or not everyone agreed. One afternoon, a group of officials from the Galactic Child Development Council arrived. They wore long robes and carried crystal data rods. One of them, a tall alien with silver skin, looked at Roy and frowned. This child was never meant to be raised by a human, he said. Double quotes. Well, your hospital thought otherwise. Don replied. The match was an error. Our concern now is safety. A kid, Dan said. He eats soup and laughs at fart noises. His abilities will grow. If not trained properly, he may lose control. Roy, standing beside Dan, looked worried. He could feel the tension. We are requesting to relocate the child to a proper learning facility. Dan stood tall. He stays with me. You messed up. I didn't ask for this, but I'm not backing out. Roy gripped Dan's hand tightly. The air in the room shifted. Soft vibrations hummed under their feet. The officials looked at each other. The bond is complete, one whispered. The silver-skinned leader narrowed his eyes. For now, but if there is danger, we will act. They left without another word. Don knelt next to Roy. You okay? Roy nodded slowly. They don't like me. They don't understand you yet, but that's okay. I do. Roy hugged him without speaking. Later that day, Dan took Roy to a nearby space park. It was a dome filled with soft air, low gravity, and colorful floating balls. Alien kids from many species played together. Some had wings, others had extra arms, and one even rolled like a wheel. Roy was shy at first. He watched from behind Dan's leg. Go on, Dan said. Try. Roy floated forward slowly. A round creature with 6 eyes bounced a ball toward him. Roy caught it with his mind and bounced it back using a wave of force. The kids stared in surprise, then cheered. Soon Roy was laughing and spinning with the others. Dan sat on a bench. Nearby, watching, he felt something deep in his chest. Pride. Not just because Roy was special, but because Roy was happy. A gentle voice spoke beside him. He is learning well. Dan turned. This was the head doctor from the hospital. You followed us, Don asked. I observe, she said calmly. Your presence has helped Roy grow faster, stronger, more stable. Then let him stay with me. I am not here to take him. I am here to warn you. Powers like his attract attention. Not all will be friendly. I figured as much, Dan said. He's just a kid. He deserves a chance. The doctor looked at the playing children. And you human? What do you want? Dan watched Roy laugh as he bounced through a ring of light. I didn't plan for this. But now, I want to be the best dad I can be. The doctor nodded. Then prepare yourself. Being his father may be more than feeding and bedtime songs. Dan sighed. I already figured that out the hard way. That night, Roy couldn't sleep. He floated in slow circles near the ceiling, staring at the stars outside the window. Dad, he said softly. Double quotes? Yeah, buddy. Why do people want to take me away? Dan sat up. Because you're special, and sometimes special things make people scared. Am I scary? No, you're amazing. They just don't know you like I. Roy floated down slowly and curled up beside Dan. Will you always be my dad? He asked. Dan smiled and placed a hand on Roy's head. Always. Even if you float to the moon, can we float together? Every day, Don whispered. They fell asleep side by side, the stars watching from above, and the quiet hum of the ship wrapping them in peace. Don had started to build a routine with Roy. Mornings began with a light breakfast of nutrient cubes, followed by music time. Roy loved soft earth tunes, especially ones with calm guitar sounds. He floated gently while the music played, his glowing skin pulsing in rhythm. You've got good taste, buddy, Dan said as Roy hummed along. After music, they'd go to the learning zone. It was a big circular room with floating tablets and glowing shapes. Alien children practiced math, language, and energy control. Roy didn't always pay attention, but he was quick to learn, sometimes too quick. One day a teaching drone asked the class to lift small stones with thought energy. Most kids barely made the rocks wiggle. Roy raised his hand and lifted the whole row of stones at once. They spun in a perfect circle over his head. The room went quiet. Roy, the drone said, blinking nervously, that is, advanced. Was it wrong? Roy asked, floating a little higher. No, just surprising. Don stood in the back. Watching, he gave Roy a thumbs up. Roy grinned and let the stones float back down gently. After class, another parent approached Dan. She was tall and covered in soft green fur. Your son is powerful, she said. Yeah, I noticed. You must guide him carefully. Power without balance leads to storms. I'm trying, Dan replied. I've never done this before. None of us have, she said kindly, but love helps. That night, Roy sat by the window again. He always liked looking at the stars before bed. Dad, yeah, kiddo. Do other kids like me? I think so. Why do you ask? Sometimes they stare. Sometimes they whisper. Dan walked over and sat beside him. They don't mean to be rude. They just don't understand you yet. But once they get to know you, they'll see you're kind and funny and really smart and floaty, especially floaty. Dan smiled. Roy giggled. Then something strange happened. The lights in the room flickered. Roy's glow changed. From soft blue to pale green. Don noticed it right away. You okay? He asked. Roy nodded slowly. My tummy feels weird. Don picked up the health scanner and checked. The readings were high. Roy's energy levels were rising fast. It's too fast. He called the nurse. Bring him to the center now. She said Don carried Roy across the corridor to the med bay. The machines started scanning as soon as they entered. The head doctor appeared quickly. He's going through a surge, she said. What does that mean? His energy is expanding. It can happen when emotions get too strong. If we don't stabilize. His abilities could overload. Roy whimpered on the bed. His glow grew brighter, and small objects around the room started to shake. Don held his hand. I'm here, Roy. It's gonna be okay, Dad. I'm scared. The machines hummed louder. Alarms beeped. The lights flickered again. The doctor moved fast. We need to calm him. Talk to him. Ground him emotionally. Don leaned close. Remember the song I hum at bedtime? Roy nodded weakly. Don started to hum. The same simple tune he always used. Slow and calm, as breathing slowed, the glow softened. The shaking stopped. The machines beeped less. After a few minutes, everything was still. The doctor looked amazed. It's more effective than any medicine. Dan sat back, exhausted, but relieved. He just needed to feel safe. They stayed overnight for observation. Roy slept peacefully, holding Dan's hand the entire time. By morning, the surge had passed. Roy was back to normal. He ate a full meal and even made a joke about the hospital food. It tastes like wet socks, he said with a giggle. You've never even seen socks, Dan replied. You showed me that video, remember? The one with the dancing dog and the sock? Don laughed. Right? That one? They walked back to their pod together, feeling lighter. But the peace didn't last long. A message arrived that evening. It was marked urgent. It came from the Galactic Child Development Council. Due to recent energy events involving the child named Roy, the message said, a special task team will visit within 2 cycles. They will evaluate his condition and your fitness as a guardian. Dan read it twice. His stomach turned. They're coming back, he said softly. Who's coming? Roy asked. People who think they know what's best for you. I have you, I know, buddy. I'll fight to keep it that way. Dan spent the next day preparing. Cleaned the pod, organized all of Roy's lesson charts, and even practiced answers to questions. He didn't want to lose Roy. Not now. Not ever. The night before the team's arrival, Dan sat with Roy outside the pod. The stars above twinkled silently. You're special, Roy, he said. You always say that. Yeah, but now I need you to remember it. No matter what they say tomorrow, you are not a problem.
Ow!
You are a gift. You're my gift too. Roy replied, hugging him. Don held him tightly, his heart full of fear and love. Whatever happens, Don whispered, we face it together. The next morning, the station air felt heavy. Don stood by the door, dressed neatly, waiting for the visitors from the Galactic Child Development Council. He had spent the night reviewing every detail of Roy's care, even printed a timeline of Roy's learning progress, meals, emotional notes, and sleep hours. Roy peeked from behind the curtain. He wasn't glowing like usual. He looked quiet. Too quiet. You okay, buddy? Dan asked gently. Roy nodded, then looked down. They going to take me away? Don knelt. I won't let them. You just be yourself, okay? A soft bell rang. The door slid open. 3 aliens stepped in. One was the same silver-skinned official who had visited before. Beside him was a tall alien with insect-like eyes and 4 arms. The third was a quiet one, floating slightly off the floor, surrounded by a calm blue light. We are here to begin the evaluation, the silver one said. Permission to observe? Don nodded. Go ahead. Roy sat at his small table, building a model of a solar system using small magnetic balls. The floating alien moved closer, watching silently. The child displays fine control, the insectoid alien noted. And his emotional glow? The silver one asked. Stable, the floating one replied. Soft blue, calm. Don showed them the records he had kept, food charts, sleep logs, energy surges, and how he handled each moment. He even showed a recording of Roy calming down. During his power spike, when Don hummed to him, he listens to me, Don said. He trusts me. That's clear, the silver one replied, but trust is not always enough. What does that mean? We are testing more than care. We are testing preparedness. Suddenly, the insectoid alien raised one hand. Strange pulse came out of his palm, an energy ripple. Roy looked up, confused. His skin glowed yellow for a second. Don stood. What are you doing? Simulated. Stress, the alien said. We must see his reaction. Another wave came. Roy held his head. The magnetic balls flew into the air, spinning faster and faster. The floating alien stepped forward and whispered something. The balls froze mid-dash air. Dan rushed to Roy. Breathe, Roy. Listen to my voice. He hummed the familiar song, slow and calm. Roy's glow softened back to blue. The balls dropped gently to the table. The silver alien watched carefully. He recovered quickly. You scared him, Dan said. You didn't warn us. Tests. Must be honest, the insect-eyed alien replied. Not rehearsed. He's a child, not a lab experiment. The floating one raised a soft hand. Enough. We've seen what we needed. The team stepped aside and spoke quietly to each other. Dan sat beside Roy and hugged him close. After a few minutes, the silver-skinned alien turned. We have made a decision, he said. You may continue as his guardian. Under one condition. What is it? Dan asked. You must begin formal training in emotional power control. Not just for Roy, but for yourself as well. You must understand how. Your presence shapes his growth. I'll do it, Dan said quickly. Whatever it takes. Then we will assign a guide. Expect contact soon. The team left without another word. Dan looked at Roy. See? They didn't take you, but they were scary. Yeah, they were. But you were strong. Roy smiled a little. I didn't break anything you did perfect. Later that evening, the new guide arrived. She was unlike any alien Dan had seen before. Tall, elegant, with soft feathers across her arms and a voice like calm wind. I am Niari, she said. I will teach both of you how to shape emotion without fear. She began their first lesson that same day. Roy's powers are not tools, she said. They are reflections. Whatever he feels, he projects. This can be used for peace. Or harm. She taught Roy to breathe slowly, to close his eyes and feel his emotions like soft colors. She taught Don how to stay calm even when Roy made mistakes. It wasn't easy. One day Roy got upset over spilled juice and caused all the liquids in the room to float. Even Niari had to duck when a cup flew past her head. But Dan didn't yell. He didn't panic. He took a deep breath and hummed the tune. Roy listened. He calmed. The liquids fell back into their containers. You are learning, Niari said with a gentle nod. Days turned into weeks. Roy began to understand how to control his powers. He no longer glowed too bright when scared. He didn't float without meaning. He even helped a younger alien stop crying by gently shaping a soft light in the air. Don was proud. Even the staff at the center noticed the change. He is growing. Well, Niari said, and so are you. One night, Dan and Roy sat by the window again. The stars blinked above them, silent and endless. Do you think I'll always be different? Roy asked. Maybe, but that's not bad. Some aliens whisper when I pass. Let them whisper. Right? You're smart. You're mine. That's all that matters. Roy leaned his head against Dan's arm. I like it here. Me too, kiddo. Just then, a message arrived on the pod screen. It blinked in bright gold. Incoming alert. Representative from the High Council requests an urgent meeting. Don stared at it. What now? He whispered. Roy looked up. Is it trouble? I don't know, Don said. But whatever it is, we face it together. The message on the screen blinked again. Urgent meeting requested by High Council. Arrival in 1 cycle. Don felt his chest tighten. He stared at the words while Roy sat beside him, chewing on a fruit cube. Dad, what's a High Council? Asked, tilting his head. They're the big ones, Dan said slowly. The top leaders. They make the biggest decisions in the galaxy. Why do they want to talk to you? Don smiled gently, trying not to worry Roy. Maybe they want to. Thank me for being a great dad. Roy giggled, but Dan could still see concern in his eyes. Niari entered the room moments later. Her soft feathers rustled as she walked. I saw the alert, she said. This is important, I figured, Dan replied. Do you know what they want? I have a guess, she said calmly. Roy's energy waves were felt beyond this station. His recent balance and control were recorded by the monitoring satellites. Someone at the top noticed, so they want to tee him. Again. Maybe, Niari said, but it's more than a test now. It's maybe about purpose. That night, Don packed a small bag with Roy's favorite toys and snacks. He tucked Roy into bed and sat beside him. We might go on a short trip tomorrow, Dan said. To the council. Yeah? Will you be with me the whole time? Always, Dan whispered. Early the next day, a silver shuttle arrived. Its doors opened with a quiet hiss. Inside stood 2 Comfist pilots in a soft blue carpet that led to a round seat. Roy held Dan's hand tightly. His ship smells weird. Like important people, Dan replied. They flew through peaceful space, stars passing by like silent watchers. The council station appeared soon after. It was massive, shaped like a ring with light flowing through it. Everything looked clean, sharp, and far too serious. Inside the main chamber, the walls were high and curved like a dome. Lights sparkled above. 12 council members sat in a wide circle. Each came from a different species, some old, some wise-looking, some barely moved at all. "This is the child?" a voice asked. It echoed across the hall. Roy stepped forward nervously. "Yes," Don said, placing his hand on Roy's back. "This is Roy, and you are the guardian? I'm his dad, the oldest council member, a tree-like being with." Eyes made of crystal leaned forward. "He is strong, stronger than we expected from one born by mistake." Dan stayed calm. He didn't ask for this, but he's trying every day. We both are. "His energy reaches far," another council member said. "He could shape peace or chaos." "Then teach him peace," Dan replied. A silent pause filled the chamber. Then a screen rose from the center of the floor. It showed recordings Roy calming a crying child with light, Roy lifting heavy stones with his mind, Roy stopping a sudden storm inside the park by forming a shield. "These acts," the crystal-eyed elder said, "show control, but also potential. The galaxy is full of fear right now. Planets do not trust one another. War whispers at the edge of our systems." Dan frowned. "So what do you want from him?" "Not war," the elder said softly. "Hope. He's a kid," Dan replied. "Not a symbol. Children grow," another voice said. "What they learn now becomes who they are later." Roy looked up at Dan. "Dad, do I have to be someone big?" Dan knelt. "You just have to be Roy. If that turns into something big, we'll face it together." The council watched closely. "We request," the elder said, "that the child join the Young Harmony program. It is not a military school. It is a place to train calmness, connection, and peace through energy." "Will I stay with my dad?" Roy asked quickly. "Yes," the elder nodded. "You will stay together." Dan took a breath. "Then we'll do it. But not because you want a hero. We'll do it because it'll help him grow." "Agreed," the council said in one voice, as the shuttle flew them back to their station. Roy leaned against Dan. "What's Harmony School like?" "I don't know yet," Dan said, "but we'll find out. Will they teach me to glow better? Maybe. But I'll still be the one teaching you how to laugh at silly jokes." Smiled. "Can I bring my flying puzzle?" "Of course." Nyari greeted them at the landing pad. "So," she said gently, "it has begun." "Yeah," Dan said. "He's going to Harmony training. I'll be learning too, how to keep up with the smartest space kid I know." Roy giggled and floated upside down for a second. "Careful," Dan warned. "You're going to drop your snack again. Snack spins better upside down." Yari smiled. "He will be ready, and so will you." Don watched Roy zoom around in small loops glowing with joy. Mistake or not, Roy was his son. And whatever the future held, they'd face it side by side. A new chapter had begun for Dan and Roy. The Harmony program was not like a normal school. It was a quiet place built in the mountains of a peaceful moon, surrounded by soft light fields and floating gardens. Everything was designed to keep young, minds calm and centered. Every morning, Roy joined a small group of gifted alien children. They practiced control not only of their powers, but of their emotions. They learned to use breath to calm their minds. They moved objects not with strength, but with focus and kindness. It was like learning how to speak with feelings instead of words. Dan sat nearby, watching through a clear glass wall. He didn't join the class, but he learned by observing. He noticed when Roy glowed too fast or when he floated higher than usual. He learned to read the signs in Roy's energy. Sometimes he even knew what Roy felt before the boy spoke. Naya visited often. She taught Dan how to support Roy without pushing him. "You are his anchor," she said one day, "but don't become his cage. Let him fly. Just teach him how to land safely." Don took that to heart. He and Roy spent evenings together by the garden dome. They played simple games, told stories, and shared snacks. One night, Roy looked up and asked, "Will I always have these powers?" Don smiled. "Probably, but powers aren't what make you special. What does? Your heart," Dan said, "and your kindness, and the way you care about others." Roy thought for a moment. "Even the way I float, especially that," Dan said, laughing. One day, a small emergency happened at the school. A young alien student lost control of her energy during practice. A bright spark shot across the room and knocked over a beam. Panic spread quickly, but Roy stepped forward. He raised both hands, and a soft blue shield appeared between the children. In the falling debris, he didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just focused. The shield held strong until help arrived. Dan rushed to the scene just as the dust settled. Roy turned and said, "I did what you taught me. Stay calm." Dan picked him up and hugged him tightly. "I'm proud of you, Roy." The teachers were impressed. Word spread quickly across the moon and even reached the council. They sent a message. "The child has shown maturity beyond expectation. We ask if he may visit nearby systems as a symbol of peace, not as a weapon, not as a ruler." Was nervous. "What do you think, Roy? Do you want to go?" Roy nodded slowly. "If you come with me, always." So their small journey began. They visited planets where war had once burned. They visited stations full of scared beings who had heard stories of powerful children. Roy didn't show off. He didn't make big speeches. He just smiled, listened, and helped where he could. On one world, a plant-based species feared Roy's energy. They kept their distance. But Roy noticed one of their children crying behind a tree. Without a word, Roy made a small glowing flower appear in the air. The crying child smiled. Slowly, others came closer. Fear turned to curiosity. Then, to joy, on another station, Roy helped repair a broken climate dome by focusing his energy and lifting the fallen panels. He worked beside engineers, learning, laughing, asking questions. He didn't act like a hero. He just wanted to help. Don kept close the entire time. He reminded Roy to rest, to laugh, to stay human in spirit, even if he wasn't fully human. In form, on their last stop, a small gathering was held in their honor. Leaders from different species came. Many were still unsure of what Roy represented. Some feared his power. Others wondered if Dan had control over him. But then Roy stood in the center of the room, did something unexpected. He spoke. "I was not meant to be born this way," he said. "I was a mistake, but my dad never treated me like one. He taught me to be kind, to be calm, and to listen. I don't want to scare anyone. I just want to live and help when I can." The room was silent. Then a slow applause began. It's not loud, not forced. Just real. After the event, Dan and Roy sat quietly outside, looking at the stars once again. "You did good," Dan said softly. "Did I make them feel better?" "I think so." Roy leaned his head on Dan's shoulder. "Do you think I'll always be called the mistake by some?" "Maybe," Dan replied honestly. "But that word doesn't have to mean something bad. Sometimes mistakes give us the best surprises." Roy smiled, like me. "Exactly like you." They stayed like that for a while, breathing slow and calm under the stars later that night. Back on their shuttle, Roy fell asleep in Dan's arms. The soft glow of his skin pulsed gently with peace. Dan looked down at him and whispered, "You weren't what I expected." but you're everything I needed." And far across the galaxy, where silence ruled space and stars drifted without sound, single bright glow floated through it all. Not a mistake, not a weapon, not a project. Just a boy and his dad, together.